Hey everyone, Kevin here with Victory 4x4. In this video, I'm going to show you how to install our rear window MOLLE panel in a 3rd gen 4Runner. So the first step is going to be to assemble your panel with the mounting brackets in order to mark our holes in the vehicle. So in order to do that, a couple things you need to know here. This panel is going to be mirrored, so it fits both driver or passenger side, and that's really going to dictate which side your mounting brackets go on. So to orient the panel, you're going to want our logo down here on the bottom, and that's going to go toward the rear of the vehicle. And then in our case, we're installing this one on the driver's side. So these brackets are going to install, as you can see it here, on the back side of the panel. Now when installing these, they are going to have one leg slightly longer than the other. So the shorter leg with the horizontal slot is what's going to mount to the panel. And to do that, you're just going to be using, you can see we have kind of a second top mounting hole here, your forwardmost mounting hole here. So those are your two top mounts. And then down here, you're going to use the forwardmost hole and the rearwardmost hole in this bottom row. Now to install these brackets, like I said, simply slide it behind the panel. And then using one of the 5/16 button heads, as well as the 5/16 serrated flange nuts, you can simply just tighten that up by hand for now. Now once you have all 4 of those tabs loosely installed, we'll jump inside the vehicle and show you how to mark the holes. Okay, so with the panel here in the vehicle, I'm just going to kind of put it up loosely and show you about where it's going to go. So what you need to do is mark all 4 of these hole locations. In order to do that, I'm actually just going to take this back down out of the way briefly and install some masking tape just to give us something to mark on so we don't have to do it on our plastic panel, just in case you mess something up. You need to wipe that off. So now, with our tape in place, you can put your panel back up here. Now it's going to fit pretty tight in this opening, but you do just kind of want to check, make sure that it looks fairly even front to rear. You don't have any weird big gaps anywhere or something along those lines. And then you can take your marker and you can mark each of these holes. Now essentially what you're looking for here is just to get a center line front to rear. So I'm just going to kind of draw a line in the center of each of these slots for the time being. And now on this bottom front hole here, it kind of wants to ride up this plastic radius just a little bit. So we'll want to make sure that we bring that down flat so that it's parallel with this surface. And then make our center line mark. Now we'll pull that back down out of the way. And now the reason we only made a center line mark there and didn't completely trace out those holes is a couple things. One being those are some fairly wide slots, so it gives you a lot of adjustability both in and out. And 2, we're going to give you an actual dimension to measure off of the back edge of this plastic panel. So in this case, it's going to be 1 3/4 inches that you're going to come out and intersect with that center line mark that you just made. And then you can just make essentially a cross mark right there, giving you your hole center. Now we'll do the same 1 3/4 on all 4 of these holes. And now with those holes marked, we'll take a small drill bit, using this simply as a pilot hole as well as a marking device for the metal panel that's behind this plastic, and drill our pilot hole. So in this case I'm using, I think this is a 5/32 drill bit, but just something relatively small. And now you can see I went through that plastic, and then I'm going to continue to drill and apply a little bit of pressure down in here as well to make a mark on the metal behind there, because we're going to need to drill through that once this plastic panel is removed. Now we'll do the same thing on all 4 holes, just making sure when you're drilling that you're trying to stay square to this surface, as well as on the top, stay square to that surface that you're working with there. Now with all our pilot holes drilled, we can remove this tape and begin removal of our panel. Now to get started here, we're going to need to come back to the center in this upper panel and remove the lens for this cargo light. Now for this, I'm just using a little flat blade screwdriver in the center of this passenger side, just kind of prying it down and pop those clips out of the way. Once you get the lens out of there, you're going to have 4 Phillips head screws to remove up here. And now that should allow this light to hang down, and then you can do one of 2 things here. The rest of this panel is just going to be held in with some plastic clips that we're just going to kind of get our hand up behind one corner and start working it all the way across and get this to pop down. Now there is enough slack here that you can kind of fish this through the hole as this panel comes down, or you can simply disconnect this clip and pull the entire assembly out of the way. Now we can just set that off to the side. Next, you'll need to come down here to the bottom and remove this rear plastic trim piece. This is simply held in with 5 Phillips head screws. Now with those screws removed, you should be able to get your hand behind this panel and just pull up, removing a couple clips along the way. And then set that off to the side as well. Okay, so now here, working on your actual driver's side interior panel, you're gonna have 4 Phillips head screws to remove. You've got 1 back here, 2 in these holes up here, and then 1 small one up top that you exposed by removing that interior cover panel. Now there's just a few differences over on the passenger side if you're installing this over there, so we'll show you those now. So up here on the top toward the front of the vehicle, or the front of your rear window specifically, there's an antenna built into this factory window, at least on the model we're working with here, and there's a small connector that pretty much comes straight out right here from the front leg of this little antenna. Now your bolt should wind up well in front of that, but it's just something to be aware of so you don't hit it when you drill through there. And then here at the back of the panel, you're going to have this little 12-volt lighter style outlet that simply, you can kind of grab a corner and pull that out. It's just held in with some clips, and then disconnect the wire harness right there and set it aside. From there, the entire install is going to be pretty much identical to the driver's side. Now at this point, the only thing holding this panel in place is going to be a bunch of plastic clips behind here. So just working from whatever corner you can kind of get your hand started behind, you can just feel around for those. And once you get close to them, apply just some slight outward pressure, and those should begin to pop free. And you're going to want to pull this out at least far enough that you expose all the marks you made behind there with your drill bit, but you shouldn't have to take everything completely out of the vehicle, so you can kind of leave this up here the way it is. Now you can see here, once you got the panel pulled back out of your way, you can see the marks that you made in this metal with your pilot drill. So you want to take that same pilot drill and just bore all four of those all the way through. Now after you have all those pilot holes drilled all the way through on your metal, go ahead and grab the 17/32 drill bit provided with your panel and drill those out. Now, one thing to note here, since you are drilling on this thinner sheet metal, one thing you can do to kind of prevent that hole from tearing out or anything like that is you can actually, once you get close and feel like you're about to go all the way through with your drill bit, stop, put it in reverse, and it'll actually clean out that last little bit of metal without catching on the panel. All right, so at this point, you got all 4 holes drilled. They're opened up to 17/32. Now you're ready to install your nutserts. So we provide you with a tool, looks just like this. It's essentially a bolt, a couple washers, and a big nut with the nutsert already installed on one here. And basically the way this works, if you've never done these before, you take your 11/16 wrench, hold that center nut, and then take a 1/2 inch socket and ratchet. And essentially you're just going to install the nutsert into the hole you drilled, hold this wrench, and then tighten your ratchet and socket, or essentially tighten that bolt using the ratchet and socket. And basically what that's going to do as you tighten that up is compress the knurled material on this nutsert up against that metal, holding it in place. Now, one thing to note here, in your bolt pack, you're going to have a couple extra of these, so if you've never done it before, feel free, drill a practice hole in some material you may have, or simply just crush one out in space so you kind of see how that works. Now, right about there, you can see that's kind of starting to tighten up on me. I'm just going to give it another maybe quarter turn right there and then stop so that I don't damage the threads in that nutsert. That should be plenty tight to hold it in place. Now you can just back the bolt out, and then using all of those components, reinstall a new nutsert on there, move on to your next hole. Okay, so now after you have all your nutserts installed, the last thing you need to do before you can reinstall this plastic panel is to drill all 4 of your pilot holes in this out to 3/4 of an inch. So we found the easiest way to do that is going to be with a step bit like this that you can pretty much purchase at any local hardware or home store. Now, these tend to leave a pretty nice edge on this plastic, but if you do have any burrs or anything hanging off there, just be sure to clean that up. Now, don't forget, you also have 1 screw up here to reinstall. All right, with your side panel reinstalled, go ahead and grab your top center panel and reinstall that as well. Now, once you have that all snapped up in place, go ahead and grab your light. Be sure to reconnect it to this harness. And then you can reinstall that with the 4 Phillips head screws. Now, with all 4 of those in, don't forget to come back and snap in your light cover. After that, we can come down here on the bottom, reinstall this trim. Just make sure it snaps in on each end and sits down nice and flat. Then you can reinstall all 5 of those Phillips head screws. All right, now with everything in place and back together, you're ready to install your panel as well as these aluminum spacers. So the longer 2 spacers, you can simply drop down in these holes and push them tight against the nutserts that you just put in place. And then for the top, you'll simply take your longer 5/16 button head bolts as well as the short spacers and install them to the panel like that. Oops. And then with both of those in place on your top 2 tabs, you can slide this entire assembly up into place, lining up your top 2 bolts and making sure the spacers push into these holes. And then go ahead and start threading this in by hand. Now after you have all 4 of those started loosely by hand, just kind of check the orientation of your panel because you do have a little bit of adjustment here. Make sure it's nice and center in the opening and that you have adequate clearance between the back of the panel, these nuts here, and the glass behind it. And then using a 3/16 Allen wrench, you can tighten everything up. Now with all those tight, that's it for this install. So if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us, info@victory4x4.com, or give us a phone call, 269-459-8447.